Hello and welcome to NDTV. I'm Aditya Kaul. It's been more than a week ever since the deadly bombing, in fact suicide bombing, outside the iconic Red Fort in India's national capital. At least 15 people were killed and more than 30 injured. Never before in the last 15 years has had a terror attack of this scale happened in New Delhi. But immediately after this, in a few days, there was a video of the suicide bomber Umar that came out that led to massive controversies on social media. The video has now been deleted after getting viral. But to talk about that, we have a lot of Kashmiris who have been in fact condemning this particular video and saying that this is not right. We have Junaid Qureshi who is joining us right now. He's a prominent Kashmiri. He's also someone who's the director of European Foundation for South Asian Studies. But without sounding offensive, I need to also mention here for the context that Junaid Qureshi is also the son of Hashim Qureshi. He's the son of Hashim Qureshi. Many would not remember, is the first hijacker of an Indian aircraft that took place, unfortunately, in 1971. That was Ganga. Rest is history. But Junaid, coming to you, you wrote a social media post which almost went viral about your first reactions to what you had seen in that video of Umar.
I've never claimed that legacy, and I've always rejected his act of terrorism since I gained independent thinking. But just let us come to the post then. First of all, it was very difficult to understand. I think the English he spoke, he tried to get into an accent and sound more intellectual than he probably was. But what he tried to do is, there's a difference in Islam between suicide and martyrdom. So
Right.
what he tried to do, because suicide is illegal, it's haram. As I said in that post, that the Prophet, peace be upon him, he refrained from leading the funeral prayers of people who committed suicide. So. And now many scholars have written about this, that when these people do these suicide attacks, they try to connect it to martyrdom instead of suicide, because martyrdom is hailed as something which is a very good thing, and you'll enter paradise then. So what I said in that post is that he's trying to make a very intelligent type of connection towards martyrdom,
Right.
but it ends up still, he tries to find foundations in Islam, but it is suicide. He has committed suicide, and not only that, while committing suicide, he has also killed more than a dozen innocent people. And now he's trying to connect that to martyrdom and trying to justify it. But I think, like I've said many times, there have been many suicides in the world. The people who made this famous, of course, the kamikaze pilots of Japan, who were acting under an army. But mostly the LTTE in Sri Lanka has made this, in the modern world, has made this famous. But they never found or tried to find foundations in religion. Now, when Umar or other people try to find foundations in religion, we Kashmiris or we Muslims, we can keep on saying that this is not Islam, which is true. But I think the time for just saying that has gone. I think the time for action is there. And there have been instances, for example, in Egypt, there have been instances in Lebanon where people who committed suicide bombings, their families disowned them,
Right.
didn't take their bodies, and didn't perform their last rites. So I think for Kashmir as well, this silent complicity or complacency which we try to have here, I think it's time for, if you really want to defend your religion, if you really want people in Delhi and the rest of the world, or the rest of India, to understand that, okay, this is not Islam. Because I keep writing about it, and I keep hearing people saying, well, okay, maybe you're right, but not everyone shares your opinion, or there is
Right.
no action to it.
Well,
So I
Junaid,
think that
Junaid, I was coming to that. On second paragraph of your statement says, just like you said, time for all Muslims, Kashmiris and non-Kashmiris to stand and speak out against such elements. You say Muslims and Kashmiris first before entering the non-Kashmiri terrain. But I want to ask you that for the first time after Operation Sindoor and the Pahalgam terror attack, we saw many Kashmiris coming out. There were candlelight vigils, there were protests that were held. But does it give you a glimmer of hope that this kind of a silence that has presumed all over for the last 3 decades or so will change? Do you think there is a growing frustration among the Kashmiris that this kind of terrorism is only going to tarnish the image but also lead to economic losses? It's going to impact each and every Kashmiri, just like it happened after Pahalgam. I mean, the hotels and the tourism industry has completely suffered after that.
And I'll say something to that which will be not so popular in Kashmir, but I think the reaction to Pahalgam, of course, that was all over Kashmir. And apart from the fact that people, the majority of Kashmiris, let me say that first, do not support terrorism, do not condone terrorism, but the extravagant or the explosive reaction to Pahalgam had, of course, as you mentioned, also to do with the economic factor. Because we haven't seen, and let's be honest about it, we haven't seen those reactions when, Pathankot happens, when Uri happens, when Mumbai 2008 happens, or, when Pulwama happened even. But when it was towards terrorism, towards tourists, I think many Kashmiris found that abhorrent. They thought that, these are guests of ours, it's against our culture. But of course, there is also a connection to the economic factor of these tourists. So that's maybe why the reaction was bigger. I just fail to understand why we Kashmiris, why we don't have these reactions when it comes to defending our religion, because that's basically what it is about.
Right.
We can have many social media posts, and we can have as much lectures as we want, but unless and until, because this needs to come from within, it can't happen from out of us. We have been facing this, let's say, since, if you take out the Palestinians and the PLO and everyone, we have been facing this since 2001. The whole world tells us, okay, these terrorists, they base their actions on interpretations of religion. And the majority of the Muslims, I would say more than 95%, says that that's not our religion. And then the world stands empty-handed and says, okay, well, then you need to have a reform within. You need to come out. I don't know whether you remember or not, but there was this letter written by 126 scholars in 2014 to the ISIS chief Baghdadi, all over the world. It was, I think it was an 18 or 26 page letter they wrote to him, finding, references in Quran, in Hadith, in history, and told him what he was doing was not Islam or was not part of Islam, and actually told him, don't do this in our name.
Right.
We have reached the point that perhaps Kashmiris, scholars in Kashmir, in India, Muslims, non-Kashmiris, need to come out with these narratives. And also, look, you can't condemn on one hand Umar Nabi, and on the other hand, you'll have a big procession when his last rites are performed.
Right.
And we've had that. Take Burhan Wani, take all these Naikus, all these terrorists who did destruction in Kashmir. Everyone on the social media, in newspapers, wrote articles, condemned them. But as you remember, how many people there were on Burhan's funeral or other terrorist funerals. So,
right.
There's a discrepancy between what we are trying to say and what we need to do.
Right. We're preaching something different and doing something different. There's some amount of hypocrisy as well, unfortunately. But Junaid, there are some reports that have come in now. The CIK, which is the J&K Police's counterintelligence, recently raided a couple in the Kashmir Valley, and they found out that there was a revival attempt at Dukhtaran-e-Millat, one of the separatist organizations that's been banned in India. And apart from that, there's a link between Dukhtaran-e-Millat and Jaish-e-Mohammed. So a particular lady, Shahzada, was given the task of reviving Dr. Millat, at a time when Asia Andrabi has been in the jail since 2018. How dangerous is this? Because the module seems to be focused on women to radicalize them, indoctrinate them. In the Delhi bomb blast also, the Jaish conspiracy, you saw Shaheen Said, her name coming and cropping up. She was also coordinating and collecting money, etc. for this module. So this happening in the Kashmir Valley, do you think this also reflects growing frustration within the Pakistani deep state that the recruitment had come down and now they are focusing on the women in the Kashmir Valley?
Look, the women have always been part of the women have been the most victimized, part of society in Kashmir. When it suited these terrorists and these organizations, women were told to sit at home and wear burqas and couldn't work and couldn't dress as they wanted. And when it suited them, they were used for arms smuggling. They were used to do recce's, and because women have an easier access, a CRPF guy or a policeman would think twice before getting someone to search a woman in a burqa than you and me. So this again is hypocrisy, our hypocrisy, that when it comes to women choosing their life partners, or when it comes to women choosing their jobs, we find our justifications in religion and culture, and when it comes to these things, we don't do anything about it. And that's why I feel, look, Aditya, you are also a Kashmiri, I'm also a Kashmiri, but apart from that, people sitting in Delhi, Washington and Islamabad cannot solve this for us Kashmiris. Again, this needs to come from us, from within us. We really, as a society, as Kashmiris, need to think about two things. One, doctors of ours who have a job. These are not stone pelters who were just released. These are doctors who have passed exams, who have lives of people in their hands, and they have jobs. So pretty well settled people are justifying suicide bombings and killings of innocent people in our religion. So we are basically sandwiched between two things. One, our culture is being demonized, and at the second time, our religion as well. And we make big hues and cries when an anchor in Delhi or in Mumbai or someone who's a non-Muslim would say this, because then we feel it is an attack on our culture and on our religion. But now it's being done from people from within us, and if we don't take a stand here, then I'm afraid that moderate Muslims or just Muslims in general and Kashmiris will lose this battle, because at some point of time the world will stop believing us.
Well, Junaid, for years together, especially during the Article 370 nullification, there were reports and, of course, statements that came out and said that there's an ecosystem of terror supporters that's running, from media to lawyer bodies to different other aspects and domains in the Kashmir Valley. There were a lot of raids also that took place, and there were arrests as well, especially against the Hurriyat and the JKLF and those conduits who were trying to support them and collect money for them. But today, this morning, there's been a raid at the Kashmir Times office, which is a very prominent newspaper apart from Greater Kashmir and Rising Kashmir and Daily Excelsior. So Kashmir Times office has been raided. There's an FIR registered against Kashmir Times. Anuradha Bhasin's name is there. She's a prominent editor. What does this say? Does this say that there is still some kind of a last, shreds of this ecosystem that are still alive? Because it does seem that there is a certain lobby which is still trying to protect that separatism that existed in Kashmir for the last 3 decades.
That ecosystem is definitely still alive. It is just confined, it is not coming out in the open, it is confined within living rooms and people's homes. But I have, for example, I've been, as you might have seen, I've been writing quite about, about JKLF and what they did in the 90s and during this era of terrorism. And whenever I go outside, people in Lal Chowk in Srinagar, they tell me, you need to be careful because there is still a lot of support for JKLF within the people. So what you also see, I also think that this also has a connection with the fact that New Delhi has, initiated relations with the Taliban. Let's not forget the Taliban is Pakistan's brainchild. They nurtured them. they supported them, they made them good enough to fight the Soviets and the Americans. I don't think they are going to give this so easily and put the Taliban and let the Taliban go into Mr. Modi's lap so easily, because it is on their border as well, and they have this big Pashtun problem in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and in the Pashtun belt. So I think this is one of the reasons that it has taken place so quickly after the Taliban came here. And secondly, there is a revival of separatism in Kashmir. And now what is happening is, it's very, what we need to understand very easy, very good, is that now, because the explanation has been that non-Kashmiris were coming here and they were recruited.
Right.
Now it's done in a different way. Now it's not only Kashmiris which are being recruited, now it's so-called intellectual, educated Kashmiris. And this narrative will of course be sold to the world that, look, it's not Punjabis, it's not Pashtuns, it's not Pathans, it is Kashmiris in the valley, in Delhi, in other places, who have a good job, who have a good education, but they are doing this. But when you see Umar Nabi's video, I really fail to understand the justifications he is trying to find. His English, he's very incoherent. I don't know whether he really believes what he says. But again, it will sell. And the problem here in Kashmir is that what we need to understand is that, and that's the thing, what happened in 2019, despite all our differences, I think we have been a bit too quick in saying, everything is fine. I think the other side has gone underground and has started new tactics and is regrouping.
Right. I wanted to, Junaid, just to cut you short, I wanted to ask you about this other side. You mentioned about Pakistan's growing frustration with India-Taliban relations. Yesterday only, the Taliban trade minister has come here. This is the second biggest visit that has happened in the recent times after Amir Khan Muttaqi came here. But the justification that's been given also is about Balochistan. Yesterday, we had Anwarul Haq Chaudhry, the former Prime Minister of the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, who in fact till 3 days ago was the Prime Minister. There was a no confidence motion that was brought in against him. But he openly said in the J&K occupied assembly that he had warned a few months ago that we will come to strike at the Red Fort, and our brave boys have made it happen. So, one, what is your reaction to that? And secondly, on the Asim Munir doctrine, what is Asim Munir up to? Is he the most radical, most jihadi, commander of the Pakistani armed forces that we have seen, Field Marshal now? And has he given an open hand to the Pakistan army and also the proxy groups to unleash a new wave of terror? Because we did not see this during the Bajwa time.
I think you're talking about the former Prime Minister of so-called Azad Kashmir, Pakistan occupied Kashmir. I'm a few months ago I was very optimistic about the kind of revolution that was happening in that part of Kashmir, and today I'm a bit disappointed that whether our Kashmiri brothers on that side only did it for the prices of wheat, flour, and electricity. If they have such people leading their assemblies, I also think that there needs to be a change in mindset on the other side of Kashmir, that as long as terrorism happens in the valley, it's Azadi or it's an Azadi struggle, and the moment there is state terrorism in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, it's colonization. So, and again, like I said, it needs to come from us Kashmiris within, and more it needs to come from us Muslim Kashmiris from within. We need to have candlelight marches in Delhi against this Red Fort blast. And the parents of Umar Nabi and his mohalla and his friends should say, we will not take his body because he is, he's a shame to our culture, he's a shame to our family, but most importantly, he's a shame to our religion, because our Prophet has said that we will not have funeral prayers of someone who commits suicide, and then someone who kills people, even more horrific. And that's one about the Pakistani Prime Minister or the Prime Minister of POK, because you still have, like, I don't know whether you remember, but a few, like in February or so last
Right.
this year, you had this Pakistan Solidarity Day, and again it's part of this strategy to make it more Kashmiri-owned. Previously, you had these big jalsas in Lahore, Karachi, Peshawar, of Jaish, of Lashkar, saying we will fight for Kashmir and we will kill Indians and whatnot. This year, the Pakistani army started with having these jalsas in Rawalakot, in Kotli, in Muzaffarabad. Now they are recruiting Kashmiris in Kashmir, educated. So you see a shift in strategy because of the fact that India has been very successful over the last 3 decades by exposing Pakistan on the international platform as this not being an indigenous movement in Kashmir, but a proxy war where Pakistan uses its radical elements, helped and supported by its army and its intelligence agencies, to bleed India by 1,000 cuts, as it was said.
Right.
And that's why the Pakistanis have changed this strategy into making it more Kashmir owned. And it started with the stone peltings. Then it started after 2019 with having these jalsas and everything in POK, which again is Kashmir, is part of Jammu and Kashmir, and now the recruitment of Kashmiris in Kashmir and then also educated ones. So this strategy of making it Kashmir owned will give Pakistan plausible deniability in the world, saying, well, listen, okay, previously it was the remnants of the Soviet Afghan jihad, the Lashkars and the Jaish and whatnot.
Right.
But today
Right.
it's Kashmiri owned, it's done by Kashmiris, it's owned by Kashmiris. And this is a news, and that's why, let's not forget, and many people have forgotten that, but after Operation Sindoor or just before Operation Sindoor, there was this new organization which came into being, which was the Tehreek-e-Taliban Kashmir. Again, you see this ownership transferring from Pak-based or, so-called Pakistani-based organizations towards Kashmiri-based,
Right.
and then involving the women as well. We Kashmiris, as you know, we are very protective of Kashmiri women. And then why? And that's why I ask my Kashmiri, fellow men and fellow sisters, why don't we stand up against these people who are using our
Sure.
women
Sure.
to smuggle arms? And when we come to Asim Munir, you said, look, I think ideologically speaking, because it was a different era, I think ideologically speaking, Asim Munir and Ziaul Haq are probably the same ideology.
Okay.
I think Ziaul Haq had a bit more room and space because of the era that he was operating in. So he could pass legislation, he could hang Bhutto, he could do a bit more brazenly also because he was in cahoots with the Americans in Afghanistan. But I think Asim Munir is the same pedigree. The only difference now is that Asim Munir, of course, does not have that kind of a space and that kind of a room in this era to hang Imran Khan, for example. But Imran Khan is in jail. He probably does not have the space to introduce legislation which is openly discriminative and openly oppressive. But Asim Munir has found a very good way of this of making this hybrid government work. And this particular what he has done very, very, very intelligently. One, he has, of course, made his peace with the Americans. At the same time, he is also hobnobbing with the Chinese. And now, of course, he has this problem of India and the Taliban getting closer. And for that, he has started this, terrorism, insurgency, whatever you may call it.
All right. All right.
He
Junaid,
has turned the heat.
Junaid, I'm out of time right now. My producers are telling me, but there's so much to talk about. But I'm glad you joined us today to explain in detail the Kashmiri perspective and the overall analysis of how the geopolitics has been changing in the context of Pakistan. Asim Munir two points that stand out. One, the change in strategy of the Pakistan army and Asim Munir. They are trying to put onus on the Kashmiris and, trying to radicalize and indoctrinate Kashmiris here in India. And secondly, you say that Kashmiris, Muslims and non-Kashmiris need to stand together against Umar, against such ideology and against Jaish-e-Mohammed. I do hope that happens and relatives, neighbors of Umar also come out against terrorism. Junaid Qureshi, thank you very much for joining us here on NDTV.
Thank you, Aditya.